Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join the third episode of More DEI Discussions. I am Dr. Marlon Moore, your host and president of Marlon Moore Consulting, which is a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy firm. More DEI Discussions is a series of interviews with C-suite executives who will share their candid insights into many of the important aspects of creating and advancing DEI principles and practices. And today, I'm extremely excited to be joined by Jane Grote Abell. Jane Grote Abell is the executive chairwoman of the board and chief purpose officer for Donato's Pizza and Jane Doe's Premium Foods. Donato's Pizza and Jane Doe Premium Foods is a 250 million, 59-year-old family-owned restaurant operator, franchisor, and manufacturing company. In addition, Jane is the Donato's brand ambassador and responsible for the overall strategic direction of the company. As if she couldn't do more, Jane is an author and expert in the field of culture and is a frequent speaker at both industry conferences and universities. In 2015, Jane released her first book, The Missing Piece, Doing Business the Donato's Way. Jane was also featured in CBS's hit series, Undercover Boss. And I saw that episode before I had a chance to meet you, Jane, and I was just thrilled. I'm a fan of the show. When I saw Donato's Pizza and saw you, I just thought that was great. So if you haven't seen it, you all check it out. CBS series, hit series, Undercover Boss. So outside of her strategic and very engaged activity with her organization, Jane is very active civically. She's a founding member of the Ross Leadership Institute. She serves on the Otterbein Women's Leadership Advisory Council, the Columbus Young Professionals Organization, and serves on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee as a member of the Columbus Partnership. Jane, thank you so much for all you do, and welcome to More DEI Discussions. How have you been?
I've been good, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, glad to have you again. And Jane, I like to start off my conversations because in my book, Diversity Starts With You, I talk about being intrinsically motivated to do this work. I firmly believe if one just thinks that this is a compliance or check the box type of initiative, it doesn't last. And once, this is kind of out of the news, meaning diversity and inclusion, things don't really carry on. But I wanted to ask you, why is diversity, equity, and inclusion so important to you?
Well, I think for me personally, it's because it supports a lot of who we are as a company. So my dad founded our company almost 60 years ago on really a fundamental golden rule of treating others the way you want to be treated. And we believe in agape capitalism, and agape being a Greek word and really the highest, truest form of love, which is unconditional love, and that we believe in doing business based on love and unconditional love. And so for me, I would say as a family business, it's something that's always been intrinsic to who we are and what we believe in. But it's really about attracting the best people, building a business, agape capitalism, that we have to have profits in order to build and retain and grow. But it's very aligned with our purpose. And so for me, as a little girl growing up in the restaurant business, standing under the sign, looking up at the big sign with my dad in the middle of the night, or what seemed like the middle of the night, he always talked about growing our business, but he always talked about doing it the right way. And for us as a family, that meant that we are inclusive of everybody. And from the very beginning, whether it was second chances or really opening our doors to our own home, to our customers and our associates, it's just been a lot of who we are as a company. And to me personally, it's about allowing and building a culture where people can be their true authentic selves. And that's not just accepting people, but being inclusive of.
Yeah, that's great, Jane. And I imagine, having customers of all demographic groups is important to having a workforce to reflect those communities and those homes that you serve.
It is. I mean, and if you look at today, our customers or our potential associates are also 60% of the people are looking for a place that they can find really people that are like them. And so it's important for not only us, for our associate base and attracting the right talent, but it's really important that we are reflecting our customer base as well. And so we know that it's good for business. We know that profits improve, is 2.3% higher cash flow. And we know the performance is increased. We know overall satisfaction increases, and that the customer's perception of the company increases. And those are all good business reasons to do it, to make sure that we're being inclusive and that we are creating an inclusive environment. But it's bigger than that. It is bigger than that. And I think it is important for not only the business, it's got to have much more of a soul and a purpose to it, in order for it not just to be something that we're talking about, but something that we're bringing to life in the company.
I like that. It has to have soul to the work. If you don't mind, I'm gonna write that down and borrow that, Jane.
Absolutely.
I'll be sure to give you credit. But so when you think about doing this work, and you've been very engaged in moving your strategy forward, what would you say is your proudest achievement as an executive in promoting DEI? I know the journey isn't over, but just, in the things that you've done thus far, what are you most excited about and proud of?
Thank you for asking that question. I said, and early on, we've been in business 60 years, but yet I still took a look at our organization, and we were not as inclusive as we needed to be and as diverse as we needed to be. And, just because you want it to be there, and that's just because you believe it, I think my biggest in the last few years has been, sometimes you have to slow down to go forward or take a step back in order to take a step forward. The smartest thing we did, and I'm just going to be honest, is hire you as a consultant. And I'm not just saying that because I think what you did was help us go deep. And I think the journey has to start within first, within the CEO of the company, the owners of the company, the stakeholders of the company, that we all have to stop and pause and understand what our own unconscious bias might be in order to take a step forward. And, that takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes a lot of courage, but it also takes someone to really help us put the framework behind it. And so I would say, I think understanding it better today because of our relationship with you, that journey is more important than what we look like. It's more important because if it's not understanding what our own biases are, we will never be able to be inclusive of our entire community. And so that was helpful. Since that time, and you helped us have really hard, courageous, honest conversations, and we could be transparent and authentic, and then build a commitment statement to it together at all levels in our organization. And that was powerful. And we were also able to attract a Black minority franchise partner who is now our largest franchise partner. And
congratulations.
That is super exciting to me. His name is Ron Jordan. And I think from that, our CIO is also a minority. And so we've been able to attract people at a very different level. And one of it's the strategy, but two of it is you have to be intentional and you have to do it back with purpose, and it has to be soulful. And so those things, I think the accumulation of all those things, that's what's got me super excited today to look at our leadership team now and really see the diversity truly represented at our senior C level for, things that I've always wanted to be. It's there and it's happening. And I'm really excited about that.
That's phenomenal, Jane. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the opportunity to work with you all. It's just been, it's been a phenomenal experience. I remember some of those conversations. Just for those who listen and understand, I like to be as transparent and open as possible. And I remember having some conversations that for me were quite emotional. That was how comfortable and safe the space was. And so, I thank you and your other leaders and really the entire organization for leaning in and continuing the great work through the diversification of your leadership team. So that's wonderful, and your other franchise operators. So kudos to you all for doing that work. Jane, one of the things I appreciated about our time together is how you all aligned your organizational values to this work. And one of your organizational values is to be open-minded. So diversity with representation is phenomenal, but that inclusion piece is also very important when you think about retention. So how does your value of being open-minded help Donato's Pizza to build a culture of inclusion?
That's a great question. And part of our strategy is in the discovery process of that is being able to allow those continued opportunities for safe space and conversations to continue. But we also build that into our performance reviews that we do semi-annual. So our values are all built into our performance review. So open-minded is one of them, and being inclusive is part of that. And so every 6 months we sit down and we have that conversation individually with every individual on what are the things that we are doing, not only personally, but amongst our team to be inclusive, and how are we rating ourselves on that. And so it's a really important behavior trait. Again, something you could talk about, but for us, it's important to also, your performance is important, but how you perform and how you treat others is an important part of what you do. So that was one thing, one step for us is to build it into that. The other part is to build it into our structure and our format of being able to have inclusive conversations, roundtables with people that are allowing people that space to talk about where are the unconscious bias in our own company that we may not recognize. What are those things, whether it was hiring practices, which we did have to go back and change some things, or whether it's our training practices, where are those things that are not necessarily as inclusive as we think they are, by creating an opportunity for people to have a development path for that.
That's phenomenal. And I think about, what you said earlier, just about your family culture. I mean, almost 60 years, 59, almost 60 years in business, but your culture is really about including everyone, right? Because it's a family environment. And so that's just really great to hear that alignment with what you all are doing with your values and tying it to DEI. I recently saw, Jane, a report from the U.S. Census Bureau that said aspiring entrepreneurs filed paperwork to start 4.3 million businesses in 2020 during COVID. And that was a 24% jump from the previous year, and the highest volume of applications since application volume tracking started in 2004. So with that being said, if representatives from various underrepresented groups wanted to own a Donato's franchise, what steps should they take?
Thank you for that. We have work to do on this, but go onto our website. We are looking for franchise growth. The majority of our growth will be through franchise. As I said, Ron Jordan, who is our largest franchise partner, came to us and literally bought an entire market. And so
wow.
Anywhere from one store to a market, we have lots of opportunity for growth. And that is, and I'll say why, I think a really important part of our growth strategy. Owning a family-owned business is important, but what we want to create is a legacy of wealth and transformation for multiples of families. And so while we own the Columbus market, all the remaining of our stores are franchised, either through non-traditional or traditional. Robert E. Lee here locally is our franchise in our non-traditional airport, who is awesome and wonderful. And so start with the website or just email me at jane@donatos.com. We are excited about growth. We're excited about building the diversity amongst our franchise partners. But why it works is because what we found is the individuals that we attract in their community build that business. And what we want to do is see that business owner be able to create the second, third, fourth generational growth opportunities. And that's what excites me about franchising, is it allows people to do that.
Jane, I'm so sorry. I'm excited. That is so powerful, because that gets to the heart of this work. We're talking about how do we create generational wealth, and how do we change some of the economic disparity gaps that exist. And for Donato's Pizza to say we're looking to ensure diverse representation in our franchises so we can close that gap, that's speaking directly to the heart of this work.
Well, and that's the biggest gap, right? And
Yeah.
so I see it in my work down on the south side of Columbus with Reeve Avenue Center, and seeing that whether it's affordable housing or all the barriers that are in front of people in order to do that. And starts with housing, starts with employment, but it is generational, and we have to take a step forward. We have to lean into this, and we have to put ourselves out there and really make sure that we're lifting people up and bringing them along, so that we'll all win when we can close that gap.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, for that. Because as a resident of Columbus, Ohio, I understand you helped to raise $16 million to create a new model for lifting our residents out of poverty. So kudos to you and your fellow trustees at the Reeve Avenue Center for all the great work that you all continue to do. So thank you, for that. So one of the ways that we can continue to close the economic gap is also through vendor diversity or supplier diversity. So I would imagine you all buy a number of things. And so, if diverse business owners wanted to provide you all with goods and services, I'll ask a similar question, like what steps should they take to do that?
Well, I'll give the same answer, Jane
Okay.
at donatas.com. And I will make sure that we connect with the right people, because I'm not the perfect person to do that,
Sure.
but I can certainly make sure that we're connecting with the right people. I think one of the things that you did for us that was really beneficial is help us ask the hard questions of we call business partners, as you know.
Yes.
Help us ask those right questions, and that is who are your stakeholders, who's on your board, so that we first understand the diversity of our own business partners that we're working with today, but also making sure that we are going to be inclusive and intentional about bringing on the diversity of our business partners for the future.
That's right. That's wonderful. And I also just say, for those who are listening and have tuned in, you can feel free to email me as well at marlon@marlonmoore.com. And I can also be sure to pass on information along to Jane and her team, because we think it's important to ensure diversity, not just in the supply chain, but also those who own and operate your franchises. So thank you for making yourself available for that, Jane. And as information comes back to me, I'll be sure to share that with you.
Wonderful.
So I like to have conversations where we get a little deeper, right? And I ask certain questions that either I've heard or I experienced, and I think others may want to know. And so, Jane, if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask you, because I've heard from ethnically diverse women that some of their challenges in the workplace may differ from white women, and that the growth for white women has far exceeded that of other ethnically diverse groups. So I'm not saying you've heard that or if that even rings true for you or others, but if that is the case, how can women be more supportive of one another in the workplace?
I think that's a great call out. I would also say I have heard that.
Okay.
And I think we have to keep our eyes and ears open to that, because just like gender or just like race, like we have to recognize that the other person has different struggles than I have had. And so I can absolutely see where that might be a challenge or a barrier. And I think the thing that we can all do, is be a mentor and or look into the communities and where we can really reach out and be alongside with people. And I think, there's lots of wonderful programs out there, but we have to be intentional about mentoring and or being a mentee, and being purposeful about those relationships. We owe it to each other. There's oftentimes women don't always support just women, period. So I think the importance of being intentional, seeking out those opportunities where we can lean in and be a side-by-side champion and an advocate and an adversary and an ally are the most important things that we can do to lift each other up.
Yeah. So it's almost as if allyship just doesn't have to be male to female or gender specific. There's an opportunity to be allies even within that particular demographic group. That's a great point. And I know that I appreciate what you said about mentorship, because I know there's a group of women in particular here in Columbus, of all different groups and backgrounds that you've partnered with to do a lot of wonderful things here in the Columbus market. Do you want to just take a moment to talk about some of the wonderful things that you all have done?
So, well, I wouldn't take any credit for it, but I think we've been intentional about making sure that we're participating where we need to participate. So for me in particular, I'll go all the way back to, I'm a second generation of a family business, and I'm the second of the children. So my dad always assumed my brother was going to run the business one day. And so I think, we all experience our own opportunities that are in front of us. And I remember when my family had left the business, except for my dad and I, after we bought it back. And I looked around and I really I didn't know anybody. And so I took the Columbus Business First and went through at that time, which was close to 20 years ago, and opened it up to the women that were listed in the top 100 women to know in Columbus. And I called all 5 of them, because we were only 5 at the time, and asked them if they would meet with me. And all 5 of them said yes.
Right.
All 5 of them have become very good friends of mine. And I think, that you have to start there. Like, have the courage to ask, because I think what we sometimes think, oh, well, they're too busy, or, oh, they wouldn't want to do that. And oftentimes it's really just asking the question that allows the conversation to be open to. And I think, especially in our market, but especially where we are today, people are more and more willing to say yes. I'd love to walk alongside you in this, and then find the right organizations. So, I'm part of the Columbus Partnership DEI committee. I've joined another of several organizations that are part of the DEI, but also women in business owners and their mentorship program, and have mentored a couple women. But like anybody, I've learned more from the people that I'm supposedly mentoring than probably they have from me. But we all get to a point in our career where you have to say, I have time, talent, treasure, and it's time to reinvest. And where do you reinvest? And I think time, for most of the people and that have gotten to a certain level of leadership, that's the most important thing we can do, is invest our time back into our people.
That's wonderful. And Jen, you've done a really phenomenal job of making yourself available, being very personable, and being very open. And so thank you for all that you've done for so many people, and continue to do for so many people. So we're getting close to the end, but I just want to, a thought came to my mind as I was thinking about your bio. Not sure how much you can talk about it, but I mentioned Undercover Boss is one of my favorite shows. So can you just talk for a brief moment? Like, what was that like, Jane? Going undercover and just being on a national, maybe even international television show, hit series. Like, so just out of curiosity, what was that like?
Well, first of all, it wasn't my bucket list. That is not something I ever said, that's what I want to do.
Uh-huh.
They were literally looking for women in the pizza industry, and there were a
Oh,
few
wow.
of us. And White Castle, our friends at White Castle, had done the first episode, and so they referred them to me. And so it was a series of interviews, and it is a very interesting process to go through. What was hard about it for me was I had to dress up as someone else, and I had brown contacts and black hair and tattoos and nose ring, and I had to pretend to be someone else, and that was difficult for me, in the sense that I had to walk into the store and pretend to be someone I wasn't, which was also very fascinating, right? Because how oftentimes do we show up to work and we have to feel or pretend to be someone that we're not? So
Sure. Wow.
it was a fascinating thing, but also then you're not allowed to be very authentic in it. It was rewarding. It was excruciating. It was emotional. It was also exhilarating, because how often do you get to reward people the way that we were able to at the end of it? I didn't exactly love the surprise from my driver. If you haven't seen it, it's one of their top rated shows because of what
Wow.
happened with our delivery driver.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think it's also, I get every time it airs in Australia or Afghanistan, I get emails or messages all the time that says, thank you for what you did, by giving a second chance. And
Wow.
the reality of it is, I had a number of people say, whoever you are as a company will come true, because it's a 2-week intense filming process. And so, but that's who we are. We give second chances. And so
Yeah.
it was, and Kanisha. So if you haven't seen the show, there's one young lady who's amazing. Her name is Kanisha. She still worked for us up until last year as a shift manager, graduated from college, has a wonderful job, works with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and is doing wonderful. And Tangi still works for us after all
Oh,
these
excellent.
years. And so we were able to experience ourselves in a whole different lens, which I
Sure.
think was a fun and fascinating, also heart-wrenching kind of a way.
Sure. Yeah. If you all haven't seen it, again, check it out. Undercover Boss with Donato's Pizza. It's a really great episode. You just said something, Jen. You had to kind of dress up and walk into the store as your, in a sense, unauthentic self, where I know that's not how you operate. And unfortunately, in this space, in today's environment, many of employees or colleagues feel like they can't be their authentic self at work. And so, why is that level of authenticity just so important to performance and being able to show up and show well for organizations?
That's a really great question. And it's kind of a two-part for me. So one, when McDonald's had bought us in 1999, our family business, and then my family had kind of left the business and my dad and I were still there, I started operating in fear. And when you start operating in fear, you do a little bit of that, really being someone you're not. And so I would put on armor. If I remember, I'd park my car, get out of the parking lot, feel like I literally had to put on armor to come into work, and not armor like I was being bullied or any of that, but armor like, this is the person I need to show up today. And that wasn't authentically who I was. And I wasn't fearful of losing my job, because I had an employment agreement, and I was, as my dad and I left, as far as family members, I just was operating from a different baseline and a different foundation. And I wasn't confident enough in myself to be able to be forward facing and be myself. And that was healthy for me. It's the first time I think I experienced it, even though I always talked about don't work in fear. It's the first time I experienced it as I would say an employee of this new company. And even I was our chief people officer, and I always say, like, the shadow you cast, I know that comes from from McDonald's, actually taught us that the shadow you cast is long, right? When you're in a leadership position, wherever you are, you're casting that shadow amongst the team around you. And if you're working in fear, then people around you are going to work in fear. And so all of a sudden you create this culture of not really truly being there and being yourself. And if I remember, I looked in the mirror one day and I did not like who I saw anymore. And so I had to have that aha moment with myself to say, if I'm not comfortable being myself in this environment, then I either need to change myself or change my environment. And I decided I was going to change myself and get back to being grounded and being okay with being authentically myself, which meant I had to have courage and curiosity and compassion and conviction, and not be afraid to have my voice. A lot of times when you're working in fear, you lose your courage to have your voice. And so I got back to being myself again, because I didn't really want to change the environment, because this was our family business, even though it was with McDonald's at the time. And so that was one of my experiences. And then I think, but for one of the things for us as a company, and I didn't share this earlier, but my brother is part of the LGBTQ community. And he was honest and transparent and authentic. And gosh, what year was it? 1992 or 1993, and which was a long time ago. And I always felt like, and we included it, same sex and non-discrimination in our EEOC in 1992. So I always felt like we are a very inclusive company and a very inclusive culture because of that. But yet, as we did this work with you, I think we found that while we think we are, we had people that, and you were in some of those meetings with us, that maybe for the first time expressed differences, whether it was religion or LGBTQ, and other differences that I don't know that we always created the safest space. And so the work that we had to do to get to a place where we are today is creating that space where it is safe. And so that's why showing up. And now, I just left a meeting a little bit ago that we have a very diverse group of our district managers that oversee our restaurants, and allowing all the difference of opinions, and they were actually building an attendance policy, allows us to have better conversation. And, if you can talk about attendance in a way that this person doesn't have access to transportation, in a way that's why they're not able to get to work, then how do we manage through that? And so it allows more diverse but better thinking when people can be authentically themselves in a very safe space.
That's phenomenal, Jane. So Jane, thank you so much. Just, as we close, is there any parting advice that you'd like to give to other organizational leaders who want to do better with DEI?
Well, my advice would be is what you taught us, which is I think we all have to pause and look internally on ourselves first. And the CEO and the leadership team, you have to challenge them to do it, because if we don't understand the biases that we have going into it, then it's just going to be something that's hanging on the wall and it won't come to fruition. I mean, we've believed it for 60 years, but the reality of what we're seeing in the growth and the trust in the community is building, because I feel like you helped us pause long enough to put right together the strategy to move us forward. And that's my biggest piece of advice, because it was helpful for us.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, you all had to do the work. So kudos to Donato's Pizza for all of the great work that you're doing through Donato's Pizza and Jane's Dough Premium Foods. I apologize. You all continue to do wonderful things, and we're excited about the continued journey and the wonderful outcomes that you've displayed thus far. Jane, as always, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you so much for being a guest on More D&I Discussions. As I said before, you all, diversity starts with you. It starts with each and every one of us. And if we want to see a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization and society, we really have to commit to this work. As always, feel free to visit my website, www.marlonmoore.com, for more informational resources on how to better your organization. Again, you can email me at marlon@marlonmoore.com. If you have any additional questions or thoughts or feedback that you'd like to share with me and or Jane, I'll be happy to get that information to her as well. So Jane, again, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see each other soon. Enjoy your time, and thanks so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. It was a pleasure spending time with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.